This video is about the succubus, and so much more. A word of caution. I am using family-friendly language, but given the subject matter, it wouldn't be appropriate to use these fiends in any game with children. In fact, even with adults, proper use of these creatures could result in a particularly dark and brutal storyline. I'm only providing this information for educational purposes. And stick around until the end because I'm even going to give you the proven scientific explanation for what succubi really are. If you've been following my series here at We Love TTRPGs, then you know we're working our way towards the lore of Will, the author of the Demonomicon within the Dungeons & Dragons role-playing game. But you don't need to play D&D to find this information useful, because these stories can be part of any fantasy RPG, and the history presented here might prove useful to anyone just wanting to learn a little about folklore and demonology. And since we are going to be looking at real ancient mythologies, be aware that somebody somewhere is going to dispute something. Some scholars say this, some scholars say that. Therefore, when encountering contradictions, I accepted the most common interpretations. Throughout this video, keep in mind the words succubus and incubus are interchangeable. An incubus isn't exactly a different creature, it's just the male incarnation of the same supernatural entity. How does this all relate to witches, Baba Yaga, and Igwilv? Well, in Europe during the Middle Ages, an unjustified and horrifically brutal fear of witches spread like the plague. Intense paranoia and hatred for the other resulted in countless innocent people being tortured and murdered. During the witch trials, some of the accused were said to have made pacts with demons, including succubi. Testimonies from these trials included descriptions of intimate encounters with demons or devils in exchange for magical powers. A powerfully influential component of those witch hunts was the Malleus Maleficarum, the Hammer of Witches, a vile book that spawned tremendous evil, contributing to the intellectual and theological justification for those atrocities. Within the foul pages of the Malleus Maleficarum, we find a description of a very powerful supernatural entity called Lilith. Though she is not a central focus of the book, her reputation as a supernatural temptress appears in relation to demonic activity and witchcraft. Additionally, succubi and incubi are described in the Hammer of Witches as demons that were believed to engage in forced, non-consensual sexual relations with mortals. The Malleus Maleficarum provides detailed descriptions of how these demons were thought to appear and the methods they used to seduce and deceive their victims. It is believed the Malleus Maleficarum was one of the earliest and most prominent sources to explicitly connect Lilith to succubi. While the exact origins of that association may be difficult to pinpoint, the Malleus Maleficarum played a significant role in popularizing and spreading that relation during the late medieval period. In Part 2, Question 3 of the Malleus Maleficarum, there is a detailed discussion about these fiends. The chapter is titled The Manner of Copulating with Incubi and Succubi, and it explores the beliefs that witches and sorcerers could engage in intimate relations with demons, particularly succubi and incubi. The authors claimed those demonic unions could result in actual physical offspring known as cambions. Furthermore, it delves into the alleged methods by which these demonic unions were said to occur, the consequences of such unions, and the methods for dealing with individuals accused of engaging in those practices. So, what is a succubus? Succuba is a noun in Latin meaning prostitute or paramour. It is related to the verb succubere, which means to lie beneath or to lie under. In its original Latin usage, succuba referred to a woman who was considered immoral and promiscuous. The term succubus was later adopted into medieval European demonology to describe a type of female demon or supernatural entity that was believed to seduce men, particularly in their dreams, and engage in intimate physical activities with them. In this context, the term retained its association with lying beneath or being in a position of seduction. The term succubus has since become common in folklore, literature, and popular culture to refer to a female demon with seductive and sexual characteristics. And the concept of succubi has appeared in numerous cultures and traditions throughout history. Though many ancient cultures from around the globe have tales of supernatural entities closely resembling succubi, it was the ancient Mesopotamian mythology where we find specific references to female demons known as Lilith. In Akkadian and Sumerian, these entities were associated with the night, sexuality, and seduction. While not exactly equivalent to the later succubus, the themes of seduction and nocturnal encounters are present in these early mythologies. Similarly, in ancient Greek and Roman mythology, there were legends of the Lamia, a supernatural creature often depicted as a female monster. A common version of that narrative suggests that Lamia was originally a beautiful queen of Libya who caught the attention of Zeus. Zeus's wife Hera, in a fit of jealousy, killed Lamia's children and turned her into a monstrous shape-shifting creature that devoured children. The key characteristics of succubi are their seductive and alluring nature. They are believed to use beauty and charm to entice and tempt mortals into intimate encounters. In many tales, they are said to visit mortals during their sleep and engage in intimate physical relations within their victims' dreams. In some beliefs, the succubi are thought to drain the life force or energy of their victims during those encounters, leaving them weakened, exhausted, or ultimately even killing them. Both succubi and incubi are typically described as exceptionally beautiful and attractive. Their appearance is designed to entice and seduce human victims. They may possess flawless features, captivating eyes, and irresistible charm. They are often believed to have the ability to shapeshift, allowing them to assume different forms according to the desires or fantasies of their victims. This ability enables them to appear in a manner that is most appealing to the person they are attempting to seduce. In some descriptions, succubi and incubi are portrayed as having an ethereal or otherworldly quality. They may appear slightly translucent or have an otherworldly glow. Okay, a few minutes ago I mentioned Lilith. During the 13th century, stories about Lilith took on particularly creative and imaginative forms. In these narratives, Lilith was portrayed as the first wife of Adam, created from the same clay as him. However, she left Adam after refusing to be subservient to him. Compounding the controversy, Lilith allegedly engaged in intimate relations with the archangel Samael, who is often depicted as the angel of death. In these interpretations, Lilith and Samael were a malevolent couple embodying chaos, rebellion, and darkness. In some versions of Jewish folklore from this period, it was even suggested that the succubi were the offspring of Lilith and Samael's union. These succubi were thought to perpetuate Lilith's legacy of seduction and malevolent influence, especially in relation to human men. The succubi were not the only offspring from the two, though. In some versions, she is known as the mother of monsters, and a captivating and haunting tale unfolds, narrating the tragic loss of her demon offspring. According to some accounts, Lilith and Samael, or perhaps a different dark entity, produced thousands of demonic progeny. In a cruel turn of events, it is said that Lilith was burdened with the heart-wrenching task of losing 100 of her demonic progeny each day. These grim sacrifices were seen as the consequences for her defiance and desire for independence from the authority of Adam and God. The relentless agony of losing her children day by day, 100-fold, was believed to have further entrenched Lilith's association with darkness and malevolence. Some interpretations posit that grief and fury transformed her into a vengeful entity, driven by a thirst for retribution against human children. Because of this, in certain Jewish traditions, there developed practices and customs aimed at protecting infants and young children from supernatural entities such as Lilith. One such protective measure involves using amulets. One prominent example is the Lilith amulet, which was believed to offer protection from Lilith's malevolence. Those amulets often featured inscriptions, symbols, or verses from sacred texts that were thought to ward off Lilith's harmful intentions and protect children from her. The amulets could be worn around the neck, attached to clothing, or placed near the child's sleeping area. Remember at the start of this video when I said there were different versions of these stories? And just keep in mind, the original mythologies and ancient texts where Lilith and Samael first appeared, they don't actually portray them as child-killing sex demons. Furthermore, there are some interpretations where Lilith and Asmodeus are portrayed as partners or consorts. That association is rooted in the shared themes of rebellion, independence, and defiance against established norms, because both Lilith and Asmodeus are seen as figures who challenge authority and traditional hierarchies. So, who is Lilith, and where did she come from? Clues to the origin of Lilith may be found in the etymology of her name, but this is no easy task since it remains a subject of scholarly debate to this day. In ancient Mesopotamian texts, we see connections with the Akkadian Lilitu and Sumerian Lil. These terms refer to supernatural female entities associated with night and darkness. The concept of these entities influenced the development of Lilith's character in later Jewish folklore. In Hebrew, the name Lilith is derived from the root word lil, which means night. Therefore, the name itself can be translated as night creature or night monster. In Kabbalistic thought, Lilith is often associated with Samael, the angel of death, and their union was viewed as a symbol of cosmic forces and the interplay between light and darkness, good and evil. Without going too deep into the weeds on this, the Kabbalah is a form of Jewish mysticism that emerged in the medieval period. It sought to explore deeper spiritual truths through esoteric interpretations of biblical texts and other sources. In some stories, contrary to her baby-eating sex demon persona, she is often considered a guardian of the night and a protector of newborns. Some Kabbalistic writings even suggest Lilith's role is a test and challenge to human souls, assisting them in their spiritual growth and evolution. Now, because this whole series of videos is really about witches, we should recognize that in some modern forms of witchcraft and neo-paganism, Lilith is revered and worshipped as a goddess. However, this is a relatively recent development and not necessarily reflective of traditional or historical practices. You might be considering how witches in your campaign world might sacrifice Lilith. Such witches could hope to appease her, thus protecting the infants of a village. In this case, they might recognize her as a guardian of the night and protector of infants. What would they sacrifice? Well, unfaithful males, of course. The heroes ride into a small village with an abundance of healthy children. They're all wearing thin red bracelets, and all of the men are very loyal and loving to their partners. You better not sleep around here or harm children, because Lilith will send her succubus to corrupt and drag you to the underworld, where you be reborn as larvae. Or what if the heroes ride into a remote village with lots of men and children, but no women? A succubus may be using this village as a breeding ground to create cambions. Now let's talk about succubus in Dungeons & Dragons. My introduction came from 1977's first edition AD&D Monster Manual, with a certain sexy drawing where they are described as beautiful human women with bat wings. But they had actually appeared earlier in original D&D's 1976 supplement Eldritch Wizardry, under the heading for demons. In the Immortal rules set from 1986, the DM's Guide to Immortals, it offered its own version of the succubus named the Whispering Demon. It tells us that they are never found with others of its kind, nor with hissing demons, which is another kind of demon. It prefers to act alone or as the companion of another powerful demon. Its natural form is that of a human female with small horns and great bat-like wings, but this form is rarely seen. It prefers to appear as an extremely seductive mortal, either male or female, and of any race that suits its goals. The touch of a great deceiver, which is how it's classified, causes an energy drain of 1 level per round, but the victim is completely unaware of the effect until 1 turn later, if it's still alive. The charmer seeks to dupe its victims by convincing them it is good and innocent, sometimes pretending to be a captive. It relies on false appearances and treachery. Rather than fighting for itself, it usually relies on a powerful companion or mistakenly beguiled allies to do the fighting for it. In 1st, 2nd, and 3rd edition D&D lore, succubi and incubi are demons of chaotic evil alignment. But that, like so much of the game's well-established lore, was completely thrown in the garbage by 4th edition, where succubi were now lawful evil devils. Fortunately, 5th edition has tried to correct this by reinventing them as neutral evil fiends. And you know what? Frankly, the 5th edition reworking of succubi may actually be the closest to real-world folklore, given Lilith's connection to Asmodeus and their willingness to work with any evil creature to further their goals of corrupting mortals and dragging their souls into the underworld. Now, for accuracy, I do need to mention that in Dragon Magazine number 417 from November of 2012, there was an article for 4th edition D&D titled Ecology of the Succubus. But look, I'm not even going to spend time on that. Like, it was so bad. It was like 6th grade creative writing class bad. You can look it up if you want, but at least it did try to connect Lilith to Asmodeus. So I'll give it points for that, but otherwise, we're just not even going to mention it, okay? In the 5th edition Monster Manual, it says that succubi and incubi inhabit all of the lower planes, and the lascivious dark-winged fiends can be found in the service of devils, demons, night hags, Rakshasa, and Yugoloths. Asmodeus, ruler of the 9 hells, uses these fiends to tempt mortals to perform evil acts. The demon lord Grost keeps succubi and incubi as advisors and consorts. Though legend speaks of them separately, any succubus can become an incubus, and vice versa. Most of these fiends do have a preference for one form or another. Mortals only rarely see a succubus or incubus in its true form, however, for the fiend typically begins its corruption in veiled, insidious ways. It continues by informing us that succubus or incubus first appears in ethereal form, passing through walls like a ghost to lurk near a mortal's bedside and whisper forbidden pleasures. Sleeping victims are tempted to give in to their darkest desires, indulge in taboos, and feed forbidden appetites. As the fiend fills the victim's dreams with debauched images, the victim becomes more susceptible to the temptations in everyday life. Inevitably, the fiend enters the mortal realm in tempting form to directly influence a creature's actions. Appearing in the guise of a humanoid who has previously appeared only in a victim's dreams, the succubus or incubus seduces or befriends its victim, indulging all of its desires so that it performs evil acts of its own free will. A mortal bequeaths its soul to the fiend, not by formal pledge or contract. Instead, when a succubus or incubus has corrupted a creature completely, some say by causing the victim to commit the 3 betrayals of thought, word, and deed, the victim's soul belongs to the fiend. The more virtuous the fiend's prey, the longer the corruption takes, but the more rewarding the downfall. After successfully corrupting a victim, the succubus or incubus kills it, and the tainted soul descends into the lower planes. The succubus or incubus resorts to charming a victim magically only when necessary, usually as a form of self-defense. A charmed creature isn't responsible for its actions, so forcing it to behave against its will won't bring the fiend closer to the ultimate prize, the victim's soul. The 5th edition description for succubi also tells us that succubi and incubi can reproduce with one another to spawn more of their kind. Less commonly, a succubus or incubus reproduces with a humanoid. From this unholy union, a Cambion child is conceived. Inevitably, the fiendish offspring is as wicked as its fiendish parent. Now, I do feel 5th edition does the best job of explaining how to portray a succubi in your game, but regardless of which game you're playing, the goals of a succubi are pretty simple. Corrupt mortals of good alignment and drag their soul to hell. In this regard, they could be cooperating with a night hag. Succubi appear in other games as well. In Pathfinder, we are told succubi can take any form their victims prefer, and they dwell primarily in the depths of the abyss, and they savor the taste of a mortal's life force, which they drain with their soul-sucking kisses. Now, before we finish this video, there's just a few more things to mention. In 3rd edition's Hordes of the Abyss on page 42, we are given an entry for the Lilith, where it says Lilith are born from the ashes of a slain succubus. And then we are given some horrifyingly shocking details describing the ritual necessary for this to occur. And the Alu demon, or Alu fiend in some publications. Now, this first appeared in the Advanced Dungeons & Dragons adventure Lost Caverns of Silkanth, which says they are rumored to be offspring of succubi and humans. They reappeared in 1983's first edition AD&D Monster Manual 2, and then again in 2nd edition AD&D's Monsters Compendium Outer Planes Appendix. In 3rd edition lore, it says that they are the product of successful procreation between a succubus and a male mortal, usually human. The male equivalent to an Alu fiend was generally called a Cambion. Successive offspring from either, with mortals, were demonic tieflings. In official D&D lore, the Cambion demon is said to be the offspring between a devil and a mortal woman. This is different from our real-world folklore, where a Cambion is the offspring of a succubus and a human. I'll cover Alu demons and Cambions in a separate video later on, so be sure to subscribe. As with a lot of past D&D lore, keep in mind that many details changed over time, and you might wish to just stick with whatever lore for whatever edition you're currently playing. If you intend on using a succubus in your games, I might recommend having an NPC victim of these fiends rather than a player's character. This way, a lot of the problematic issues can be handled off camera, implied and never detailed. In this case, it could be up to the players to hunt down and slay the fiend to rescue its victim. An example might be a good and noble king who believes he is being visited at night by the ghost of his beloved wife, when in fact it is a succubus draining his life force. And should the king die, well, the kingdom would fall into the hands of a wicked son. Something of that nature. So at the start of this video, I told you that I was going to give you the scientific explanation for what succubi really are. The concept of succubi and incubi were prominent in medieval demonological beliefs, and this was often used to explain various phenomena, including nocturnal emissions, sexual dreams, and other experiences that were not fully understood at the time. Now, just for clarity, night hags and succubi are related in that neither are real, and both are just sleep paralysis hallucinations. These types of hallucinations can be absolutely terrifying, but they aren't real. It is not uncommon for someone experiencing these events to believe they have woken up but are unable to move or speak. They may even believe they are seeing a shadowy figure holding them down. Sleep paralysis is an evolutionary holdover from when our distant ancestors slept in trees for protection from predators on the ground. These incidents are more common in children and should stop after puberty. If, as an adult, you're still experiencing sleep paralysis, it's your body warning you that you're under too much stress. By reducing your stress, you can make them stop. Today, our modern science understands this, but ancient cultures did not, and thus the myth of the succubus was born. And though it was a long journey to get here, in addition to some modern witches venerating Lilith, a common thread linking all of these videos in the series, from Baba Yaga to witches to succubi, is the stories of feminine power and rebellion. Succubi and references to Lilith appear in many different forms throughout art, literature, and pop culture. Recently, Critical Role featured a tiefling wizard named Lilith, and there was even a popular musical festival called Lilith Fair. This conversation will continue to be expanded as we learn about archdevils and demon lords in the future. Now, I really hope you enjoy this video. I hope this information was useful to you, and as always, I'm your host, Atten, here at We Love TTRPGs, and I want to thank you so much for supporting the channel by liking this video, leaving your thoughts in the comments, and if this is your first time here, please subscribe, turn on notifications so you don't miss any of our future uploads. Again, thank you so much. Open your eyes. Because that's when they attack.